Welcome, everyone. We will start in a few minutes. Thank you for joining us today. We're so excited to share this amazing project with you. So we'll be ready in a couple of minutes. Please feel free to use the chat for comments and for questions throughout the entire session. Our entire team will pay attention to your questions and we will have time to review them by the end of the call. So welcome, welcome, welcome. I see friends and colleagues here. I'm so happy to see you here. You'll be muted through this session because of the amount of attention this project got. We had a lot of registered attendees today, so the cameras and the microphones will automatically be turned off. But you can leave questions in the chat, and also you can chat among yourselves privately if you want to. If you find a friend here and you want to comment, you can do that too. Hi from Venezuela, India, wow, Brussels, Spain, Australia, wow. Hi, Catherine, Copenhagen, wow. Argentina, yeah. So excited to see you all. We'll start in a few minutes. Whenever we're ready, please, Sembra Media team, let me know when you want me to start.
Ya estamos listas.
Okay. So hello and welcome to everyone joining us for this presentation. My name is Michalia Stravner. I'm Sembra Media co-founder and executive director. It's a pleasure for me to be here welcoming you to the launch of Project Oasis. We are honored to have you here at this event. Due to the fact that we have more than 300 registered attendees, cameras and microphones will remain off. However, we welcome your questions throughout the session and in the chat area. And at the end of the presentation, we'll be sharing your comments and answering as many questions as possible. I want to give special thanks to the partners, allies, and media leaders that are here today and were part of this amazing project. This project comes as a result of a year-long research into independent digital media in Europe. It represents the collective effort of dedicated researchers, writers, editors, and innovation and communications team who have worked tirelessly to bring this vision to fruition. I would like to especially thank the Sembra Media operations team who provided their incredible support and expertise in this project. We believe Project Oasis will be transformative, not only for the media landscape, but for the media development organizations too. And we are very excited to share with you and hope you will find it as insightful and as important as we do. I would like to give you a brief overview of the agenda and the speakers so you know what to expect today. First, Madalena Giovanu, our project director, will start by recognizing our partners, and we will hear a few words from GNI's team. Secondly, Sembra Media co-founder Janine Werner will provide highlights of our key findings, followed by the 3 regional managers who will share brief case studies of some of the media we found in Northern, Southern, and Eastern Europe. At the end of our session, we'll have 20 minutes to address your questions and comments. And as mentioned, feel free to share questions throughout the event. Our team will be reading your comments and questions. And thanks again for being here with us today. I now will pass it on to Madalena. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Mick. Yes, as Mick said, we would really like to, first of all, thank our partners on this project, the European Journalism Center, the Global Forum for Media Development, the Media and Journalism Research Center, International Media Support, and the Google News Initiative, all of whom have helped shape this project and research from the beginning through their regional expertise, their contacts, and their support of our team. And at GNI, we would like to especially thank Connor Crowley and Angelica Velati, who have supported the vision for this research from the start and help us bring it to life. Angelica, would you like to say a few words? Maybe not. Oh, maybe we have a bit of a delay, or Angelica is not here yet.
Hello.
Oh, hello. Great.
Oh,
You are here. Please take it away.
Hi, Madalena. Thank you so much for the introduction. I'm really, really excited to be here today with you all. I'm working in Google as a news partnership and ecosystem strategy head for the EMEA team. As you said, working with Connor and Robin on this project. So our team coordinates a lot of activities under the Google News Initiative, and these include partnering with media experts on exciting projects like this one. And I'm really thrilled to be launching this today because we've been shaping and seeing how the project has been shaping for the last 12 months. And the aim of the Google News Initiative is actually to work with publisher and journalists and accelerate the long-term digital transformation of the news ecosystem. And we strongly believe this project is part of it. We think that research will give us the opportunity to better understand the European digital news ecosystem, and this through understanding better who creates digital news in Europe. What is their editorial focus, their business model? What are the main challenges or main opportunities, hopefully? And above all, what support do these news entrepreneurs need? And this in 43 countries in Europe. So this is huge and really exciting. So not taking our time from the actual presentation of these results. Once again, thank you, Sembra Media. Thank you all the partners on this project for this great collaboration on such an important project. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelica. We really appreciate your support throughout this last year. If we can go to the next slide, please. In the interest of saving time and getting to the juicy bits, I won't name all of them, but I would also want to acknowledge all our promotional partners, a group of organizations who really share our mission with this project of visibilizing these independent digital native media organizations. So we want to thank them for helping us share this with their networks and communities, journalists, and others who would hopefully benefit from using our research and our directory. And now I'd like to pass the presentation on to Janine Warner, the co-founder and executive director of Sembra Media, who can tell you more about our findings.
Thank you so much, Maddie, and thank you everybody who's worked on this project. Especially want to thank all of the leaders of media organizations who agreed to our interviews. This is, as many people have already said now, taken us more than a year, and more than 60 people have worked on this project. What do we mean by digital native media? And we often say independent digital news media. That's a mouthful. We've published the entire criteria on the website that is now public as of today, and you can read everything we use to evaluate which media should be included in this. But primarily, we're looking for new kinds of media that were born on the internet. We have tremendous respect for traditional legacy media, as some people call them, who are doing great work in the region. But we found that these startups, often created by what we call entrepreneurial journalists, have their own characteristics, their own unique challenges as they start small and grow bigger, that are quite different from the digital transformation we see in more traditional media. So we chose to focus a lens just on what we call digital native media. I know the term independent is also often debated. By that, what we mean is they're financially, editorially independent. None of the financial interests that support them are overtly controlling their editorial policy. Again, you can read the entire criteria on the website. Why do they start media organizations? Well, when we talk to media leaders, we find it's often about journalistic independence. They're frustrated by the limitations of the media they've been working in. They're concerned that certain populations are not being well covered. They're filling news deserts. They're covering underserved communities. And they're often stepping away from places where media consolidation, media capture, and other challenges to freedom of the press lead them to want to start their own independent organizations on the internet. What distinguishes them? More than 85% of the media in this directory say that covering human rights and society is one of their primary focuses. And those include subtopics you'll see in the report like migration, refugees, gender, feminism, topics many journalism think are not as well represented in some of the other media in their markets. More than 50% dedicate resources to investigative journalism, one of the most expensive types of journalism that's being done. And more than half of the media in this collection are nonprofit. And I should point out that we sought out public interest media. We sought out media that were really providing a service to their audience. And it's not a surprise that many of them form as nonprofits, but we do have a mix of for and nonprofits. They're also relatively young. More than half of them started in the last decade, but we did find some that are as much as 25 years old. What makes them different? Yeah, 58% of the founders of the media in this cohort of 540 media organizations are women. Many of them were started by 2 or more people. And when we added up all the founders of all of these media, 58% were women. We were astounded by that. We found high incidence of women leaders in our research in Latin America and Africa and Asia. This is the highest number we found. And we're really impressed by the cooperation and the work that we see. Many of these have multiple founders and they're highly collaborative. They often partner with other media organizations to do bigger investigative projects, to share their stories with other media, traditional and digital, and they work really hard to do things like cover stories across borders. They range from tiny little 1 or 2 person organizations, often run by volunteers, to giant organizations with more than 100 people on their team making millions of euros every year. There are 540 in this directory. We started with 1,000. We did a really strict criteria on them. We couldn't reach all of them for interviews, but we did actual interviews, sending researchers with local experience to talk to media leaders in these markets in more than 30 different languages to produce this interactive media directory in English, where you'll find 540. We don't claim that that's all the media in Europe that deserve this kind of attention, but we think it's a pretty good start and the biggest sample we've seen to date. Their teams are relatively small, especially when you consider how many of them win awards and partner with bigger organizations. We found that the vast majority have teams of less than 20 people, and 20 to 50 was kind of that 10 to 50 range is where most of them fall. Very few of them have the size teams that traditional media have had historically. Again, they're relatively young. This chart shows you there were some peaks in their development. I think it's kind of interesting to see what was going on in 2016 that really shot up a lot of development. And we see another peak in 2020 where the pandemic seems to have spurred a lot of new kinds of media. Everybody wants to know how much money they make. And I have to say that's a really tough question, especially when you have such a broad sampling of media across so many countries, more than 40 countries, more than 500 media organizations, some of them tiny, some of them huge. And so as we've done in other research projects, we broke them into what we call media business maturity tiers so that we could look at them at different sizes, different ages. Now, not all of them in the number 1 category are 6 years old. Some of them are 6 months old. Some of them may be more than 10 years old, but the average was about 6 years. So in general, as they get older, they seem to get bigger and make more money, but that's not a global rule. And we found some other characteristics that seem to really affect how they build sustainable organizations. But breaking them into these groupings help us better understand that things like consulting services and membership work at different size levels. So the bigger you are, advertising, audience support is probably going to be more helpful. When you're really small, individual donations, those early grants can make a huge difference. When we looked at all the ways they make money, we asked 2 different questions. What's all the ways you earn money? And we actually had 36 different questions about that we grouped into these 5 macro categories. And then what's the main source of income for you, the main revenue source? And so when we looked at popularity, what's the one that the most of them reported? Grants jumped out at the top. Now, again, I want to remind you that more than 50% of these are nonprofit, and we sought out the kinds of public interest media that tend to be most attractive to donors, but that still was a really striking finding. When we looked at the most important revenue fundings, the primary revenue source means where did you make the most money, not just all the ways you do it and what's the most popular that you see on the left side. On the right side, you see that for-profit media, number 1 was advertising, number 2 was subscriptions, and number 3 was grants. Whereas with nonprofits, grants were number 1, donations number 2, and membership number 3. And again, we try to look at this data in a number of different ways to find insights about what helps them work and what seems to help them build sustainability. I mentioned there's a high number of women founders in this. And so we started to look at, does that affect how they earn revenue? And what we found is teams with at least 1 male and 1 female founder, men and women working together, earn the highest average revenue. Teams with only male founders came in second. And we're looking deeper now into why the women founders in this study seem to have the lowest revenue. There are a lot of theories about that. Some of it has to do with the countries they come from, how recently they were launched, but we do think that's a striking finding. So mixed teams with male and female founders seem to be the strongest. As we found in other studies, we looked at what we call the diversity of skills on the team. Remember, many of these are started by journalists. They're often run at first by a small team of journalists, and many of them lack experience in business, in sales, in accounting, in financial projections, and all the things most of us did not learn in journalism school. And that's really a lot of what Semper Media is about, and what these kinds of studies are about, is helping journalists build stronger, more sustainable organizations. And one of the things we found over and over is when those journalists start diversifying their own skills and hiring dedicated people to work with them, especially in sales, business development, revenue generation, their revenue goes up. And we understand that if you have a small budget, it's hard to hire a salesperson, but when they do, they earn a lot more revenue, 6 times the revenue when there's a dedicated salesperson than when there's not. All of the things that I'm sharing today are available on the website. This is just a screenshot of it, but it's live today. You can go to this URL right now and start poking around. In the website, you'll find the entire report and a media directory that we created. The report has multiple sections. All of the key findings that are in the executive summary, we go into much greater depth in the report. You can read the entire thing online. You can also download a PDF of the report if you prefer to read it offline or you want to print it. The PDF is about 57 pages with lots of images, but it's just the main part of the report. There's a lot more information on the website itself. One of the things that's not in the PDF, for reasons you'll soon understand, are what we call the country summaries. All of the media profiles in the directory were created by the researchers that we sent out to do these interviews. And when they finished that directory, we asked each of them to create a summary about their country. These summaries are 1,000 words each. Yes, that's 40,000 words of content just in this section of the country summaries. We don't really expect you to read that over lunch. We really see this more as a resource for you. So if you're thinking about working with media in Portugal or media in Azerbaijan, you can go to the directory and search for the media in that area, and then you can read the country profile and learn general trends in that country, see other details about each of those countries. So behind each of these links is a 1,000-word document that describes the country that's written by the researcher who worked there. The media directory itself is another, I think, about 240,000 words. Each profile is about 500 words. Again, this is a resource for you where you can search by name any of the media that you find in the report. You can plug their name into here and go and find their profile. If you've heard of a media organization, you want to see it's here. But you can also search by things like, I want to find all the media in Spain that get audience support and cover the environment. When I did that search last night, I found 15. When I narrowed that search using the advanced filters that are in the directory, and I selected just nonprofits, it went down to 2. So this is a highly configurable, searchable database of information where you can do comparative searches across countries, across a number of filters that we've created. In each of the media profiles, once you find a media organization that you're interested or you identify 2 or 20 that you want to read about, each of them has a specific profile, again, written by the researchers and edited afterwards, where you'll find a narrative description and you'll find structured data with all of the questions that are represented in the filters. So you can see what year they were started, where they publish, what kinds of content, and things like how they earn money. Now, not every media leader answered every question we asked. We always respect that some of them don't want to share all the data. And in some cases, we tried to protect media leaders who might be in places of high risk by not sharing everything about them. For example, when we asked revenue, not all of them answered how much money they make, and that information is not public. So one of the few things you won't find in the directory itself is their annual revenue numbers. You'll only find that in aggregated anonymized data in the research project. But other than that, you'll find a tremendous amount of data in all of the profiles in this directory. And with that, I want to pass this on to one of our regional managers who helped to manage the researchers in her region over the last several months, and who's going to share with us now some of the examples of the media they found that I think really bring the report to life. Because at the end of all this, our main goal is to support the media leaders who are trying to make this happen, as well as the people who support them. Sanne Reimer, I'd really love to pass the baton to you so you can tell us about the media you found in Northern Europe.
Thank you so much, Janine. The first slide shows us Flip in Germany, a media outlet. That's an example of innovative media in the country. It reports on ideas that contribute to a better economy. And it's up to the audience to decide if it's either a flip or a flop idea. That's the meaning behind the name. Flip focuses on journalism, community and innovation, and gained a lot of attention through the cross-media GPS project they did called Sneakerjacht or Sneaker Hunt. They bugged 11 pairs of old sneakers from German celebrities with the GPS tracker. And the sneakers were thrown in a clothing container, and Flip found out that they eventually ended up in landfills and in the environment of the African continent. And that's not where the project stopped, because with this information, Flip decided they also wanted to show the audience that things can be done differently. And so they teamed up with a sneaker manufacturer to create the Marabout, which is a sustainable sneaker made out of trash. And the crowdfunding for this project generated more than 80,000 euros. And co-founder Felix Rohrberg reflects in a tweet saying that surely it's unusual for journalists to produce a sneaker, but he also wants media like Flip to get the space to innovate, and he guarantees independent reporting. And so next example of innovation in media comes from Sweden, where Newsworthy has developed 300 local automated news feeds in the country, together with data journalism agency J++ in Stockholm. Newsworthy really wants to understand, explain, and review society with the help of data, and also strengthen local journalism in that way. They're sustainable through subscriptions, editorial collaboration, grants, and also by making content for companies and organizations. And on their website, they emphasize that they want other journalists to use their articles. So it is one of the many examples in which media outlets in our directory, especially Northern Europe, I can only speak for Northern Europe, are very open to sharing and collaborating. And that's also true for the next one, Andere Sites from Austria, which means, on the other hand, the media outlet is the first in Austria to focus on collaboration between journalists with and without disabilities. And despite the fact that around 18% of Austrian citizens live with a disability, there are very few journalists with disabilities. And so their perspective is missing in the media landscape. And even though they started out as a volunteer initiative, they had a very successful crowdfunding last year, which made them sustainable. And they developed best practices for inclusive journalism, and they are very happy to share their experiences on that topic with other media outlets also outside of Austria. As co-founder Clara Porak says, the more different the people who do journalism are, the more varied the perspectives and the more complete the view of the world. And we hear this much more often in media outlets from Northern Europe in our directory, where representation is definitely an important issue. One way to create better representation is seen in the next example, a collaboration with the community. In community journalism in the UK, West Leeds Dispatch is a good example. They're doing exactly that. They bring engaged, community-driven journalism with a people-powered newsroom of over 60 contributors. The media outlet also invests in training the contributors and started as a voluntarily operation, but is now, after 7 years, sustainable. It gets its revenue from grants, advertising, and individual donations. And last week, they were nominated for the Community Newspaper of the Year at the Newspaper Awards in the UK. And even though they didn't win, they got very good feedback from the judges, saying West Leeds Dispatch is a fantastic community-led publisher that has empowered local people with a voice. And then the last example from Northern Europe, if we talk about community, we also see how journalists themselves build community among each other. We see quite a lot of cooperatives in this region. And the main incentive for the journalists of research collective SPIT from the Netherlands to join forces is to create independent journalism at a fair price for the freelancers involved. 8 freelancers started this collective or this cooperative together. They focus on topics like climate, sustainability, healthcare, environment, and they sustain themselves through fundraising, donation, grants, and they also sell the work to other outlets. And I'm happy to stop here and give some space to my other colleague.
Thank you so much. And remember, we'll have time for questions at the end if you want to follow up on any of these wonderful examples. I'd like to introduce now Leila. Leila, I'm going to ask you to say your last name so I don't butcher it. She was a regional manager in Central and Eastern Europe and managed the team of researchers who worked in that part of the world. Leila, please join us.
Thank you, Janine. Hello, everybody. I'm Leila Vujanic, and we are starting in Central and Eastern Europe with Ukraine, where many new digital native media outlets were born after Euromaidan in 2013, which created greater opportunities for media free from oligarchic and government influence. Here we have Svoy City, media outlet currently operating from Kiev, Ukraine. It was established in 2018 to cover Ukrainian East, specifically to cover development of cities there during massive investment in infrastructure and civil society. But last year, February, aggression on Ukraine brought dramatic and rather brutal changes. So not only rules and regulations of everyday life are constantly changing, but media organizations also had to adapt and change the rules of their own media production also. For example, Svoy City, the whole team had to move to safer places, so they changed their mission, and their new mission became to help the audience to move through the country as well. Today, Svoy City is offering informations for internally displaced people, refugees, but also for people who stayed in the occupied area. And it's not only Svoy City, other media, Ukrainian media in our directory also needed to adapt, to change platforms on which they publish, to use Telegram for direct alerts to their audiences, to move from local to national coverage, rolling out breaking news, etc. Meanwhile, in the Azerbaijan, our next example, Abzas Media, it was founded in 2017 to cover human rights, corruption cases, and social affairs. In Azerbaijan, it was established by civil society activists after attacks on civil society in Azerbaijan and after some existing media outlets were shut down. Shortly after launch, Abzas Media rolled a series of articles about corruption cases that some government institutions were involved in, and as unwanted results, suffered from cyber attacks, and its web domain was blocked, and its co-founder, Ulvi Hasanli, was sent to military service. After he returned to civilian life, he discovered that the media outlet operated only through proxy links, and its audience has decreased by 10 times. Again, same situation. It's not specific for Abzas Media. We have many other outlets in our Azerbaijan part of the directory suffering cyber attacks, court cases against them, domains blocked. Some of them chose to operate from exile, while everybody chose to use social media rather heavily to try to avoid restrictions. We are moving then to Poland, to Okopress, also very challenging political situation, but actually in Poland, political polarization in the country is boosting demand for public interest, independent media. Okopress is a civic tool of power control. It covers human rights, democracy, rule of law, rights of different social groups. It also fights disinformation through fact-checking and through investigative reporting. It is among top 10 online media in Poland. It's particularly strong on social media platforms. All the content they publish is produced in-house and all accessible without paywall and advertisements. What's specifically interesting about Okopress, so they have, I think, 58 full-time regular employees and around 50 freelance contributors, so quite a big newsroom, which is supported with individual donations that cover approximately 70% of its operating costs. What's interesting here also, there has been a lot of talk in last decade about disillusioned audiences losing trust in the media, but actually throughout Central and Eastern Europe, we can see opposite trends where audiences are returning to media and actually willing to invest and financially support these organizations. It's not only Poland, we have examples like Telex, Merce in Hungary, Alternivata in Bulgaria, Denik in Slovakia, and Czech Republic. Moving to Czech Republic now, where we have Denik Referendum from Brno, Czech Republic, started in 2008. Main motivation was to create space for the socialist and green opinion and perspective, which is missing in post-Soviet public space. Denik Referendum works under slogan, no oligarchs, no paywall, just your donations and our work. This slogan, no oligarchs, is quite common for Central Europe, where in many countries there was state and media capture, and media, existing media organizations or media houses were taken over by oligarchs and politicians. Many experienced journalists were left of job, not to leave the media field, but to start their own independent press, to move from print to digital, but they also had to find some new sustainable business model. And editor-in-chief of Denik Referendum, Jakub Patočka, came up with a unique source of income, so the readers who wish to debate under the articles pay a fee. I will pass it now to my colleague, Elena.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Elena, Leila, please tell us about the media you found in Southern Europe.
Sure. I will start with Italy, with the publication In Genere, an economic magazine with a gender perspective, which wants to make visible the opinions of high-profile female academics who, as editor-in-chief Barbara Ledacherny puts it, are ignored by mainstream media. In Italy, a trend that we have found is that media founders with a background in academia aim to spread their knowledge and expertise outside their field. In Genere is an editorially independent project of the think tank Fondazione Giacomo Brodolini, proud of being a niche publication, which aims to bring a feminist view to the public discourse. It was founded in 2009 by a group of women economists who themselves felt unheard by the mainstream media despite their high-profile curricula. In general, it publishes data-grounded analysis, and its articles are often quoted or used as sources by mainstream media. Next slide is about a Portuguese media, Mensagem de Lisboa, a local community-based outlet covering the country's capital city. Since its launch in 2021, it has worked hard to create room to hear the voices of the people living in the city, as director Catarina Carvalho says. In countries like Spain and Portugal, independent digital native publishers emerged and even thrived in the aftermath of big events, such as the financial crisis in 2008 and 2009, or more recently, the COVID pandemic. During COVID, digital native outlets in Portugal found new opportunities to engage audiences with relevant content. Mensagem is the only outlet in our research that publishes information in English in Portugal. It also translates content into the Creole language to reach audiences of African descent living in Lisbon and its outlying areas. Moreover, it organizes new rooms, meetings, and tours around the city with the readers, publishes chronicles written by residents who are normally underrepresented by the media, such as homeless people. And when we talked to her, Carvalho said that they were also planning to start training young journalists from low-income neighborhoods to help cover these communities as well. Next slide, please. In Slovenia, the founders of Ostro say that they publish investigative and data journalism because they are determined to nurture the right to know as a fundamental human right. More than half of digital native media included in our research, as Janine was saying, do investigative journalism. Ostro publishes in-depth local, national, regional, and international investigative pieces with the goal, as the team puts it, of spreading knowledge and inspiring future generations of journalists. Ostro is also interesting because it has a sister media outlet in Croatia, launched in 2021 following the success of Ostro's Slovenian activities, development, and training methods. It is a member of the Global Investigative Journalism Network and of the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Nevertheless, in Slovenia, as in many other markets, media leaders also told us that doing investigative journalism is costly and it requires long-term investment. Next slide, please. Shukru Oktay Klic, co-founder of Turkish YouTube channel Fine, says that he foresees Instagram will become the primary place for growth for the outlet. In countries like Turkey, what the 2022 Digital News Report by the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism has defined as news fatigue around COVID, but also around politics, for instance, and causing people to avoid news, has driven many to social platforms. Fine is focused on explanatory videos, and by spring 2023, the outlet had more than 100,000 followers on Instagram, which is almost a tenfold increase compared to autumn 2022 when the organization was included in our research. So it seemed they're going towards the right direction.
Thank you, all three of you, not only for those great presentations, and I really believe that the examples are what bring this project to life, and the fact that you can search for all of these media in the directory available on the website, and I'll show that link again in a second, is really what makes this possible. I want to recognize that Europe is an extraordinarily diverse place. We did interviews in more than 30 languages to make this possible, and although we tried to find trends, and despite the obvious linguistic, economic, political differences, there are a lot of commonalities among these kinds of media, not only in Europe, but in our research in Latin America, Africa, Asia. A lot of these same trends and distinguishing elements seem to hold true. But that said, recognizing the diversity, you should know that at the end of May, we'll be publishing the executive summary and all of the country summaries where we did research in languages other than English, we'll be publishing in the primary language. So more than 30 translations of this material will be available in about a month, and we'll send that out to everybody who registered for this seminar as well. With that, I will stop the presentation part of this session. I'll leave this screen up for a moment so you can capture the email address, or you can reach out if you have press information or other questions, and the web address, like I said, where you'll find the report, the directory, the country summaries, and many other things like the methodology for how we created it, the criteria, etc. At this point, we'd like to open it up for questions. Sane has offered to kind of screen your questions in chat as we're going. So I'm going to let her share those questions. I'll put the screen up again at the end of the session to make sure everybody has the URL. And I'll stop for a moment. Sane, have you found a good question we should jump in on?
Yeah, I have a few questions in the chat. So we also answered a few of them already, but it's good to share the answers for everyone who didn't put an eye on the chat. Lucy asks if it's possible to get to know the names of the researchers. I already let her know that all the names will be published on the website.
In fact, let me show that while you're talking. So
Yeah.
on the website, we worked very hard to make sure that everybody who worked on this project is visible. Please keep talking and I'll just scroll through this page while you do.
Yeah. Rhiannon asks, can we update our publications profiles if things have moved on since the interviews? Which is a good question, I think. And I can give the answer, or you can do it, or Madalena. Feel free to go ahead.
Do you want to take this?
I would just say we are dedicating resources to continue. I'll stop this for a second for some reason. I think the site's a little slow with all the traffic on it at the moment. We do have resources to continue to maintain and develop this for a little while. We are open to contributions to helping us continue this further. But yes, if there are changes in your profile that you want to share with us, feel free to reach out to us and we will do what we can to update those. And there's also a place on the website to submit a media organization if you're interested in sharing a media that we didn't cover. I will point out, you can't just add yourself to the directory. You would be submitting your own or another site for consideration, and then we would have local researchers and the regional managers evaluate that site against our criteria to make sure that it meets our definition and fits in with the other media on this site. But it's an excellent question. More questions?
Yeah, we have questions from Joe Mitchell from the UK. He says, great presentation. We're happy with that. And he asks, will the raw data be made available aside from revenue?
Yeah, I think I'll take this one, but Janine, feel free to jump in. Yes, so in the directory that now we had a bit of an issue with the website, but now you can see it, Joe. If you go to the directory, you'll be able to see a lot more information about each organization. It's kind of standardized across all the media profiles. So revenue is actually one of the data points that we collected as private for each organization because it's kind of sensitive information that we wanted to sort of keep private, and we've used it as aggregated, anonymized in our report and the other materials. But for each profile, you'll be able to see quite a lot of information about the countries they cover, the types of themes they cover, regional coverage, national coverage, local, how big their team is, what their social media and publication channels are that they use, as well as information about their transparency. So this is going to be available for each organization in the directory. And I believe, Janine, correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe our intention is in the future to also make available an interactive dashboard with a bit more data that you can go and play with. Thanks.
Look at you teasing the future. Stay tuned. I think there's a rich database here and we're exploring a number of ways to make it accessible. I want to also recognize there are a lot of academics who have used our research in the past, and we know that this is just a treasure trove of original research that you can use. So we're looking at more ways to make it searchable and help you find more trends that might be useful to everyone. Excellent. More questions?
Yeah, there's another question from Daniela. She asked, how can we collaborate with these media and how would their payment methods be?
I think in terms of collaboration, yeah, the second part maybe depending on each organization, but for the first part, Daniela, as you read the profiles of each organization, you'll be able to see the founders and directors, their names are available there. So we hope that this is sort of a first step to find out who is running these organizations and who manages them, so that you can get in touch if you are interested in exploring collaborating on a project or a story, or if you're a freelancer and you would like to write for them. So hopefully this will be helpful in that sense, rather than approaching them from scratch or having to find their names just on the internet. In terms of the payments, as I said, that's something that I think is individual to each organization. So I'm sure they will be able to say that when you approach them.
Great. We have another question from Ken. Do many media outlets use social media as their primary distribution methods? Janine is nodding already, Madalena too. So
Yes, we have quite a large percentage that use social media as their primary distribution and engagement platform. If you go to one of the filters in the directory, you also be able to filter just by primary publication platform. So if you're interested in seeing all of the media that publishes on Twitter or YouTube as their main platform, or Instagram, you'll be able to see all of those across all the 40 plus countries in the directory. And then I think Janine is about to show some specific data about this.
No, she's absolutely right. The directory will let you search for that. And we did analyze that because we found some interesting trends in the region that a lot of them are using social media to share their content. And that seems to be driving revenue. Whether they're making the money on social media or not is not necessarily the correlation. But what we found is if one of the main ways they share information is social media, they were making more revenue than others. And then we looked at what was that primary revenue source based on these different distribution areas, and the average across the entire directory and the average with the highest revenue in the study. So that's a slide that you'll find, or a table that you'll find in the report itself. Great question. Please continue.
yeah, we have another question, this time from Sophia from the Center for Media Pluralism and Media Freedom. And she says, I would like to ask if in terms of general findings, you identified some trends in terms of geographical distribution of these journalistic initiatives across Europe. So trends in terms of geographical distribution.
I think maybe that's something that you could answer, Sanel, because you had a bit of an overview of your regions. I think there are some general trends, but we also try to look at the media that we featured specifically by country and then at a European level, rather than go too much in depth for each region and sort of silo the regions. That being said, there for sure are some similarities and as well as differences between the regions.
Yeah, I think in Northern Europe, I mean, we didn't measure this trend yet from the data, but in general, I can say there are quite a lot of local focus outlets, especially the UK has a lot of media outlets that focus on very local and sometimes hyper-local communities. Yeah, I think that's all I can say about it now. The UK, I think, is an exception in this. A lot of other media outlets are also connected to bigger cities, but it is not strange to see local or hyper-local media initiatives in this directory. And maybe Elena wants to add to that. Yeah.
Perhaps a question for Sophia. I don't know if she means where the media are based or what area they cover, or both.
I think it's just general in terms of formation, like what similarities they have in terms of why they were set up, what they cover, maybe how they fund.
No, because
themselves.
she says geographical distribution. We do have a lot of local media also in Southern Europe, and not necessarily in the main cities, if that helps.
Well, if Sophia wants to add something. Oh, she says yes, where they are based. So she's already.
I think maybe just one thing to note here that you will see when you read a bit more about the methodology of the project, but we tried to be quite intentional with our researchers and amongst our team about selecting a range of media in each country that was geographically representative and also had different focuses in their editorial coverage. So not just feature only local media or only national media. That being said, I think we do have a bit more national media in the directory or regional than we do, for example, local, but we try to get a broad sample within the scope of this project to make sure we could show a little bit of everything in terms of coverage and the location where they're based.
And I just want to acknowledge, there are probably a lot more in England, Germany, France, Spain than we included. We worked really hard to make sure we had at least some in every country in the region, and that led us to split our resources across the region. But we definitely expect and hope to add many more in the future. Excellent question.
Yeah. Do we have a little bit more time, or yeah?
Please.
Yeah, so Poulis was very interested in what you said, Janine, in the beginning about the contribution of specialized salesperson in financial planning. And he I think, thinks about it himself now maybe in a media outlet that he's working for. So he asked, are there people or organizations that you have worked with expert knowledge of independent media in the sales field?
Boy, that's an excellent question. Let me just say again, in every study we've done, when we've looked at their teams, if they're all journalists, they don't make as much money as if they're journalists and people with business, sales, and other experience. That doesn't mean journalists aren't good at raising money when they get smart about it. It means that journalists tend, at least in our observation and interviews, tend to be so focused on the journalism that it's hard for them to focus on business. Every day there's a new story that's more interesting than making sales calls. So until you start to get somebody who's really focused on just making money, whether that's a grant writer or a membership focused person or somebody selling advertising, somebody helping you with programmatic advertising, those kinds of roles focused on earning more funds lead to 6 to 9 times revenue in every market that we've studied. It's one of the few things that cuts across Latin America, Europe, Asia, and Africa in our research. And it, again, this doesn't mean journalists can't make money with media. It means diverse skill sets on their teams are key to the success and sustainability of these media.
Yeah.
Let me just jump in and say the website is had a little hiccup there for a moment, but it seems to be working well again now. And I just wanted to take a moment because I couldn't do it before. A number of us at Semper Media really tried to support this team. This is the team that you see today that really led this project. The report itself was a very collaborative editorial project. Catherine really helped us to get started on the writing, but many people contributed to the narrative and the final report. The communications team developed partnerships and really worked to get the word out. We have even more people on the tech team that wanted to show their faces on the website. There's a financial team. Just paying people in more than 40 countries is a huge challenge, as you can imagine. We had legal support, design support, and Grove Agency gave just fantastic PR and partnership development support. And then this is the research team. Somebody asked, can we see who the researchers are? We always try to make sure that everybody who works on these projects is given the credit they deserve. You'll find their photos, their bios. If they didn't want their photo online, we respect that. And in many cases, you'll also find a link to their LinkedIn profile and other information about them. If you click on the name of any one of them, you'll go to the actual profile where you'll see their LinkedIn. And if you read the country summaries at the end of each one, you'll find a link to their profile as well. So you can see who wrote that summary and where it came from. All of those researchers brought local experience in their markets. Not all of them were from those countries. Some of them covered 2 countries, but they all had local experience and local contacts before they started working with us. And again, I want to really acknowledge Madalena, Leila, Sane and Elena for helping recruit that team in the first place. Just finding researchers that could cover all of Europe was a huge part of the first few months of this project. More questions?
Yeah, we do have more questions, and Madalena is also answering a few of them already in the chat, so that's great. We had a question from Rushati. She asked, could you please tell us if these media outlets will be interested in collaborating on reports on global topics such as climate change with journalists from outside of Europe, such as Africa and Asia? Well, I think I would say the directory is now available, so it gives you also an opportunity to reach out to those media outlets that focus on these topics already and maybe invite them to a collaboration. But we didn't ask them specifically if they're open to collaboration. Could be a good question for a next follow-up research.
That being said, sorry, Sane, just to complete this, you can filter by, many of them do collaborative journalism and cross-border journalism. So you can, that is actually one of the filters in the directory under, I believe, journalism techniques, if I'm not wrong. So if you go and filter by that, you'll be able to see all of the media that does already collaborate with both outlets in Europe, but also internationally. So that will give you an idea if they're probably open to collaborations.
Excellent. And I just want to say, we don't publish the email addresses or contact information of any of these people. We do that out of respect for their privacy, and we don't share a mailing list of them. But if you go to the profile and then you go to the website, most of them have a contact page, a general email address on their website. If they share it, you'll be able to find it and reach out to them. More questions?
Yes, Samir is saying the findings on women founders or co-founders are really striking and built on the findings from the Americans and also Inflection Point International. Can you talk a bit more about this dimension and what conclusions you draw from these findings? Maybe that's for you to answer, Janine.
So again, maybe because I've worked on all of the projects that we've done, I can bring some perspective. First of all, it's impossible to generalize about an extraordinarily diverse group of women and what motivates them. Many of them are motivated by covering things that they just weren't allowed to. I've heard people say everything from, I was in the Amazon and nobody in the capital city that I worked in Brazil wanted to cover the Amazon jungle. So I started a website to cover that part of the world because I knew it was vital to the environment. I heard somebody in Mexico once say that she quit working at the daily newspaper she was at and started her own fact-checking site because they told her she couldn't write that Coca-Cola is bad for you because they were a big advertiser and they didn't want to offend them. If you don't know, Mexico is now the most obese country in the world. They beat the US on that. She was highly motivated to share that story. So in Europe, we heard similar kinds of things. Whether they're men or women, they have lots of motivations. But what I like to say in audiences that have a lot of women is, if you're working in a media organization and you feel like you're under a glass ceiling, you get to build your own house today. And I think what we're seeing with a lot of these women is frustrated by media capture, polarization, limitations, editors telling them their ideas weren't important, and many other factors led them to start their own organizations. And the internet and the community support and the grant funding that exists today that didn't exist 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago made it possible for them to do it. And that's why we've seen all over the world this growing number of independent digital native news media. Some of them publish print as well. Some of them do podcasts and other things, but they're all new organizations, many of them exploring new forms of journalism. And the fact that there's so many women leaders is actually something that's hard to benchmark. We find studies that others have done that talk about women in leadership roles, women in editorial roles, women directors, women journalists, but I have had a very hard time finding research on the ownership of traditional media broken down by male and female. And I think it's because in places like Mexico, less than 1% of the owners of newspaper and television are women, while upwards of 30+% of the digital natives are started by women. I could talk about this all day, but it's definitely an area we look forward to exploring more in Europe.
I think those were almost all the questions. Please let me know if I forgot one or I passed one over. Let's see, there is one remark from Dalibor saying this is a great opportunity for cooperation and also the merging of different interests that our media deal with. So I think that is a really interesting remark. And I think that is also one of the reasons why we started this research in the first place.
Awesome. Well, we're right up to the end of the hour, so the timing couldn't be more perfect. I want to make sure we give a shout out to Claire Cook, who works with one of our partner organizations, IMS. Hi, Claire. She shared in the chat during this an opportunity that they have. Claire, if you want to share that again in chat to make sure anybody who came in late doesn't miss it. They are working with media in the European Union with grant funding available for people who are working on digital media like this. If you have other opportunities like this that you want to share with our audience, please feel free to put them in the chat area. Thank you so much.
Maybe one more question, Janine, if it's possible, because Maria just put a question in when you started to finish. How do you deal with legal issues following the publication of articles that people in power may not like and will sue you, and you have to fight this in courts? Do you have legal experts who can help the journalists?
That is a real challenge for many of the media we work with all over the world. Part of why we built this directory and why we started the one in Latin America before it is to make these kinds of organizations more visible to organizations that do provide legal support. I'd like to give a shout out to Trust Law that is run by the Thompson Foundation, also MDLI. There are a number of media legal defense organizations. There aren't enough. It is a challenge. And I know that the fear of being sued is actually something that stops a lot of media from publishing in the first place. But part of our goal in making these media more visible is that when they reach out to organizations like that, they'll have some validation already just by being vetted and mapped by the researchers that we hired. And we hope to help connect them in Europe the way we've connected them in Latin America with support organizations. If anybody wants to add anything else on that, I welcome it.
I
Fantastic.
think now we really reach the end of the questions.
Well, we've reached the end of the time. I want to thank all of you who've joined us. I know there were more than 300 people who signed up for this. We really appreciate you coming out to help us support this. We welcome you sharing this now. We will be posting lots of things on social media, on Sembra Media's social media channels. I know the Google News Initiative has a blog post going up on their European blog, and we welcome your press inquiries. I'll put the contact information back on the screen for one more moment. And we'll thank you for your time. We'll leave the window open for a minute if you want to make sure to capture those URLs. I want to thank the team. I want to thank our fantastic partners and all of the media leaders that gave their time to make this possible.
Thank you all for staying up for right to the end of this presentation. And thank you for the team. This was an amazing presentation. So proud of you.
Thank you, Midge. Thank you, everyone. And yeah, thank you for participating. We'll also share key links with all of you post-webinar. So you'll probably get an email from us with a reminder of the links, as well as a recording link, which I know a few people asked for. So expect that in your inbox soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, I think we can stop recording, shut this down, and